I'm ready, John. I just want you to roll out the red carpet for me first before.
As much as I can do that, Brian, I will, my friend. Thank you guys so much for joining today's presentation. Estate planning and where are we going from here? I think we are in a kind of a state of flux in life insurance and estate planning with everything going on and an administration change. We thought it was a really good idea today to bring all of you together with estate planning attorney, transfer tax extraordinaire, Brian Standing. We are so happy to have him here. Brian is a preferred partner with Watermark Life and with Nicole Rex, our CEO. They have a nice little group of CPAs, attorneys, life insurance professionals who, refer people to each other, kind of boost each other's games, I think even more importantly. So Nicole, do you want to introduce Brian a little bit more and talk about how you guys kind of kicked off that relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian, like John had mentioned, we got situated in a networking group with some other CPAs and financial planners. Brian's our token estate planning attorney, some other insurance agents, P&C, life benefits, those types of things. And really, we're just a trusted group of advisors that we know really well and have learned to tap into each other's, our brain knowledge and lean on each other quite heavily when it comes to difficult clients in regards to their situations and what they're trying to overcome financially. And so Brian has been an incredible source of knowledge for not only myself, but our agency as well. And he's been extremely helpful with, just understanding the tax law and, creative ways to help clients just earn either better tax-free income or avoid paying taxes at death. And so with that being said, I'm very excited to have Brian on today. So thank you.
I think Nicole kind of highlighted something that's so important is that team approach, right? That we're presenting to clients. The idea that it's not just you out there on an island. We all, I think, like to fancy ourselves experts in everything, but to have a valuable team around you who can provide knowledge and advice, I think is so important. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got into estate planning and kind of just your entire philosophy around estate planning as well?
Yeah, I will. Sure. And one of the things I love about the collaboration, just to go back for a moment, is I spend a lot of my meetings talking about the importance of life insurance, and Nicole spends a lot of her meetings talking about the importance of estate planning. And it's nice to be able to do that because you're not talking about, we all know what we do, right? And we do a good job, but we don't want to sit and talk about what we do and how you need it. It's nice when you have the team that supports those positions, and each of us seeing the need and spotting the issues is what makes the team so valuable, because then we can come together and make the plan work. But yeah, so nice to meet everybody. I'm Brian Standing. I am an estate planning attorney. I have been only an estate planning attorney for, 14, 15 years. I was the, kid in law school that had no idea what he wanted to do and why I was even there. And kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And then unfortunately, when I was there, my father passed away, and no estate plan, no insurance. And so I'm in probate, and I'm going to be an attorney. I can figure this out. And I had no idea what I was doing. Wow. And so, obviously it's a bad situation, but sometimes, good things come of that. And I ended up saying, I can see that there's real value here, not just in having a plan, but having a team, right, that you can contact and say, what do I do now? And so based on that, I started taking the tax classes and the estate planning classes, and it's like a little puzzle. And I have an engineering background, so that kind of fit my little puzzle brain. And yeah, ended up doing estate planning. And so, my goal is to come into the relationship and hopefully solve a problem. And hopefully that's one that's many years down the road. But it's that process of kind of analyzing information, meeting people, determining what the goals are, what the obstacles might be, and then coming up with a plan, right? It's all about what is the plan. It's not the documents, it's not the policy, it's the plan. Where are we going? And then what do we need? What's going to get us there?
Brian, in all our conversations preparing for this, I didn't know your story. We didn't get really into that. And that's incredible. And thank you for sharing that with us. And,
Yeah.
and I think, you know, in the worst way imaginable, you probably learned just the real importance of this and the serious and the you know, just the enormity of this kind of planning. And so again, thank you for sharing that. And you know, one of the things that we're really going to get into today is the idea of where life insurance fits into the plan of estate planning. And again, like you said, you kind of learned that firsthand early in your life. Can you talk about that a little bit? Just sort of how you use life insurance in your practice, how it comes up, how the conversation is used?
Right. So, you know, it's a tool. And when we're doing planning, we have tools, right? And there are many different types of tools that we can use, whether they're for avoiding probate or saving estate tax or, you know, trying to save capital gains. Whatever it is we set out as the goals for the estate planning, we kind of know in the back of our mind that we have various tools to do it. And so as sure everyone on this call knows, you know, some of the common reasons that we're going to be looking at insurance, you know, business owners, buy sells, estate tax issues. I mean, for many of you now with these huge exemptions, that may be something that we're not doing as often, but we'll talk a little later in this webinar, maybe that's coming back.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's just liquidity. Maybe it's in combination with charitable strategies. It could just be to minimize certain risks, like paying a mortgage or getting kids through school, right? This is something that we have. But the reason that I'm specifically coming back to it a lot currently is the uncertainty, right? All of the strategies, some of which we're going to talk about today, that I use to save estate tax, for example, they're on the chopping block. Every time we have certain, you know, administration come in, they go A, B, C, and D. We don't like this. We're going to take it away, or we're going to change the exemption. But life insurance is something that's certain, right? This is something we can control. And so if it is an option for the client, this can be a nice strategy to sort of take control of what we can control when we've got the laws eliminating or changing all of these other strategies.
Yeah, and Brian, you talk about this kind of current landscape we're in. We had the administration change, 6 months ago now. I think the idea that was put forth was kind of the sky would be falling immediately. Just there was going to be all this change, and immediately day one, you know, capital gains tax goes to 70. You know, that's kind of what we were told. What is the current landscape? Has any of the fear and, you know, just preparation come true? Is that in the pike right now? So where we can see where it's headed. I think we're going to get into some of the specific, you know, tools and strategies that might be going away or might stay. But where are we right now in terms of this grand change?
Yeah. So far, some of these you know, kind of dreaded changes have not occurred. And the proposals have been changing over time as we see what, you know, what we might have votes for and what there may not be votes for. So it may be easier to kind of look at different key aspects. I won't look at all of them. Some of you know about income tax rates going up, capital gains rates going up over certain AGI. I'm going to be more focused on the estate tax and some of our limitations on strategies that we're using in estate tax planning. Of course, any of you are welcome to bring up, you know, the other things that are happening. So let's talk estate tax first, right? We know we are in the most generous estate tax environment, right? This is 11.7 million per person, right? So we're over 23 million per couple. And note that under the current rules, it's actually larger than that. Most of our clients have business, they have real estate, and with the current rules and discounting values, that exemption is for most clients truly closer to $30 million. So it is enormous, right? Very few clients currently are going to be paying estate tax. And so they had looked at, or at least in early proposals, well, let's bring that back to 2009 levels, right? This is going way back of 3.5 million. That quickly sort of fell off, and I had the idea that it may, and the reason is there are a lot of political consequences to lowering estate tax. even for people who are never going to pay it. They just don't like it, and fair enough. So, why do I think that? Well, it's already going to expire, these current exemptions, and they're going to return to 6 million per person in 4.5 years, right? So end of 2025. And so my thinking was, why have the political consequences of lowering estate taxes when they're going to do that anyway, and you don't have to take the blame for it? Mm-hmm. So it's not like we can all say, okay, great, we don't have to worry about estate tax. This deadline is still coming, and it just means we may have more time to do planning. So bottom line is we're generous now on estate taxes. Clients who have estate tax issues now will always have them, so they should be doing planning. Clients that are maybe under 6 million maybe will not have them anytime soon. Ones in the middle, that's where it's really challenging, right? 6 to 20 million even for a couple. So that's the estate tax landscape. Any questions about that? I don't want to just rattle off bullet points if anyone wants to jump in. If not, I'll just keep moving.
Well, one thing I'm curious about, Nicole, Tim from Watermark, how has that conversation gone with some of your clients, with some of your agents, just about how life insurance plays a role right now? Do you sense a sense of urgency out there among, advisors and professionals out there?
I think there's more of an uncertainty right now. It seems to be coming up. And I think people are starting to look at planning for the future. Like Brian said, down the road, 4 years or so from now, and just kind of getting things in order.
Yep. And we'll talk, John, about some of the rules that may come in sooner than that, right? Where are the urgencies versus this looming estate tax change?
Yeah. So, I think one thing that we can all do as life insurance professionals, maybe the most important tool we have is urgency, right? When your clients out there feel like something's happening and they don't want to miss the boat, or they feel like right now is the only time to act, that's a very good opportunity for us as life insurance professionals to kind of explain our expertise and to show that we're kind of reading the tea leaves along with everyone else. So Brian, when you talk about those really matters of urgency, what are the life insurance opportunities that exist right now that might not exist going forward, or might not exist months or years from now?
Yeah, so the theme here, right, is for the administration is sort of generating revenue, right? So if they've taken estate tax off the table for now, right, where's it going to come from? We've talked a little about some of the capital gains changes and the income tax rate changes, but what they're looking at from a transition standpoint, when people are gifting or passing away, they're looking at the capital gains rules. And so right now, as I'm sure most of you on this call know, we have also very generous rules related to inherited assets, right? When you inherit assets, you, generally speaking, receive a new income tax basis on those assets, right? It doesn't carry over from your parent, for example. It steps up. And if you were to sell that asset, there's no capital gain, right? You inherited a certain fair market value, you sell it, no capital gain. Great. So there's kind of a two-part approach here. One is to limit that step up. In other words, the basis from the parent would just carry over to the child, and they would have that low basis from whenever they bought the property and depreciated it, or they bought the stock. And if they sell it, they would have a gain to pay. So that's kind of, step one. Step two in the proposal is, well, let's treat that passing of the asset when someone dies or there's a gift as a sale for capital gains purposes. In other words, simply receiving the inheritance, you recognize the gain. That is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Where is the money going to come from to pay this tax, right? When you receive a house, when you receive a building, even shares, in publicly traded companies. We don't want to have to sell these assets to pay the tax. Now, what is the likelihood of this passing? I hope it's low. I think this is very severe. But we have to keep this in mind, that this could be an immediate change. This has nothing to do with the cliff in 5 years. This could go into effect right away. And now everyone inheriting assets has capital gains right away. So John, that's one of the items on my list to keep in mind if we're on the fence about liquidity when someone passes away. That could be critical.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out is, I think sometimes we have these big conversations and it comes across as if we're talking only about $10 million clients or $5 million clients. But, you know, so many people out there, you know, like Brian said, will inherit something and might be put in a position they don't want to be put in. And so having these conversations with your entire client roster, I think is so important. And just making sure that they know that everything you talk about doesn't have to be applicable to them immediately, right? If you're talking to a 35-year-old nephew of yours, for example, that 35-year-old now is not going to be the same person 7 years from now. He's not going to have the same, you know, financial setup, not going to have the same income, et cetera. You hope not going to have the same income and financial setup 7 years from now. And so I think one thing that's important is just conveying at all times a sense, again, that you know kind of where the landscape is, not necessarily being an expert. And one of the things, by the way, that we're going to be offering at the end of this conversation is access to Brian. And so one of our goals at Watermark Life is you don't need to be the expert because we are. And if we're not, we'll find you them. So that's where Brian comes in. But, you know, Brian, kind of continuing this conversation on, and I also want to point out, everyone, I dropped a list of what we're kind of talking about right now into the chat function. And so as we talk, if you want to refer to estate tax exemptions, basis step-up changes, which is what we're talking about right now, I think it's kind of a good little reference point for you. But
John, sorry to interrupt real quick. Just to speak to your last point, though, is that to create the sense of urgency with clients in the planning and getting it done immediately, I think it's so important from an underwriting perspective, specifically to push, hey, you're never going to be healthier, hopefully, than today. So, right, every year that you age, the insurance is getting more expensive for you. So if we can capture a preferred rate at today's age, it makes much more sense to do it today versus tomorrow or the next year or the year after, right? So that's kind of somewhere where I push either my agents or my own clients is like, hey, these are things that you should be considering right now because it's only going to get more expensive as you age.
Nicole, that's a great point. And I think the biggest takeaway from that is the idea of there's a plan for you at every age, right? So if you're 25, Nicole's exactly right. Get in on life insurance early. You're going to set yourself up with a great rate. And obviously life insurance can be changed as you age and as your clients age. And so, Nicole, thanks for saying that. Brian, we're moving on to removal of grant or trust rules. How does that kind of work in the landscape?
Yeah, so we'll get a little technical. This is where the call will get technical, but with everyone on this call, I'm sure we've got this.
We can get coffee if you need it, guys. We've got that.
Yeah. So there's a unique kind of trust, and we kind of take it for granted because most of our life insurance trusts that we're dealing with comply with these rules, and we don't even worry about it. But there is a type of trust that we use now, very commonly structured as a life insurance trust, that says that we can give an asset away, or we can give monies away that can then be used to buy life insurance in this trust. And we don't own it for gift and estate tax purposes. This is a completed transfer, right? However, by having certain authority built into the trust, that grantor, that individual, right, who set up the trust, who's making these gifts, they still own the trust for income tax purposes. So the trust is defective, or the transfer is defective for income tax purposes. Completed transfer, it still goes on your tax return. Why does this matter? Well, very often we're going to take a look at current policies that are already owned by life insurance trusts, and we may not like them, right? We may want to do something. We may want to get a different policy. We may want to use the value in that policy, right? Right now, because this trust is treated as being owned by the individual, we can do exchanges, right? There's no transfer for value, there's no tax issues. We can exchange policies. every time an administration comes in that's looking to sort of close some key tax loopholes, they look at these rules, because what we can do with these current tax rules is extremely powerful, well beyond this conversation that we're having now, right? Picture putting a building in this sort of defective grantor trust and letting the client pay the income tax for the kids tax-free for the next 30 years, right? This isn't an annual gift. This isn't a lifetime gift. This is free gifting. So they don't like these rules. The sort of collateral damage would be much less flexibility with life insurance policies in these trusts. So one of the items that I would tell you to kind of take a look at on your list of clients is, are there policies that need to be reviewed? Do we need to make changes before we would not be able to do this within these trusts? Now, obviously, if your clients own the policies, this doesn't impact anything, but these are for clients who have life insurance trusts. So a little technical, just want it to be something you can spot when you see it.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Oh no, I was just going to move down the list if everyone's good on that one.
Yeah, if there are any questions at any point, by the way, drop a message into the chat function, raise your hand, send up a white flag, whatever you need. We'll notice you somehow. Yeah, Brian, why don't you move along? Elimination of discounted estate values.
Yeah, so I referenced this before, so I'll be quick on this one. When we are calculating, how much liquidity would we need to pay an estate tax, right? We will consider now discounted values, right? And when someone owns a business, when someone owns real estate, we are allowed to take a discount, assuming they're not single and they don't own 100%, right? There's no discount there. But even for married couples, we can take a discount on the fair market value of that asset. So we're paying far less estate tax. They don't like discounts for family members. They know that one spouse isn't selling her half of a building to someone else ever. So it's kind of this fiction we create. Like, what if she sold it to a third party? They wouldn't buy half a building for this much. Well, that's never going to happen. So they don't like those rules. And so this is just the theme of, higher taxes, fewer loopholes. So understanding that might be disappearing. So people looking to make gifts, looking to make transfers now, which we'll talk in the next section about current strategies that we're using, there may be some urgency if we want to utilize discounted values on transfers.
So that's kind of where we're at right now, and maybe where things are kind of headed in the near future. And I think, again, as we said, anytime that you can use that sense of urgency about where we're going, even fear, quite frankly, selling to fear is a very valid tactic, because it at least says that people are in the mood to review this. And so as important as, again, these estate changes and the new landscape is just the general idea of combing through your client book and having these conversations with them on a regular basis. It makes you seem smart. It makes you seem, that you're on top of it. And it also, I think, gives a level of comfort to a client who almost, again, as we said, they don't have to be an expert because you are, and so on and so forth.
Brian, really quick, when our agents we're all reviewing our clients, different trusts or life insurance policies, what specifically are things that we should be looking for? If you could help remind us what's important when you're reviewing with your clients. I know every client's situation is much different, but what are some red flags, or what are some important things to just be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so some of the keys would be just revisiting the purpose, right? Because when we establish a policy, we might be doing it for some particular purpose, but life changes. And maybe whatever that purpose was, whether it's access to cash value or eliminating some risk that maybe no longer exists, we would need to then take a look and say, does this policy, the way we established it, well, it was to accomplish A, but now we want B, right? So that's just being in touch with our clients and understanding what's going on in their life and how it's changed since we set this up. Mm-hmm. And then the other part, aside from purpose, is just revisiting the planning itself, right? maybe clients have updated their estate plan and they have entirely new wishes, but we didn't take a look at that beneficiary designation. And that is no longer appropriate, right? We spent all this time on this great trust with instructions for who gets what and when, but then the policy pays directly to the kids, right? That's a failed estate plan. We all know that. And so each time we're revisiting estate planning, we want to revisit beneficiary designations on insurance and retirement assets, titling of assets in the trust, right? This is the key to kind of make the plan work. And so, you know, just looking at purpose and then kind of more technical, and then of course, estate tax planning. You know, we may have policies where we now feel pretty confident they're not going to need this, right? We're not going to need access to the cash, for example. And so now we have this asset in their estate and they're going to pay estate tax on that entire death benefit and they're never going to use it. So we should be thinking about life insurance trusts, for example.
Well, you know, Brian, thank you again for taking us through some of the points of urgency, but I think that was a pretty natural segue into what are just sort of the general principles or the general strategies that we should have in kind of our back pocket always when it comes to life insurance, estate planning, and just this conversation in general. Again, I'm going to drop that into the chat function as well if you want to kind of stay around with us, but you know, point of order number one, large gifts to dynasty trusts before executive change. You know, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll sort of frame how my first estate tax conversations go with higher net worth clients, right? They come in and they go, we need to utilize the estate exemption before it goes back down or before Biden changes it or whatever, you know, they're excited about what's going on right now. So we want to gift $11 million. And I say, okay, so what are we going to gift? How much income is associated with that? Because when you gift away an asset, you also gift away its benefits, including its income, its right, you know, to live in a property, for example. Certain amount of control, right? And so immediately the conversation stops because the client says, well, no, I just want to give the asset out of my estate. I still need the income. So, well, okay, I would love to have my cake and eat it too. This is not the reality of estate tax planning, right? It doesn't matter what the title says. If you owned it or if you had beneficial ownership, in other words, that income was still coming to you, we haven't done anything. So there's this immediate stop of, okay, this is going to be more challenging than we thought, right? Okay, well, let's sell the asset to a special trust for my children, and I'll just get paid the income via a note, right? So they'll get the income, but then they'll pay it to me in the note. Well, that's a great strategy. It doesn't use any of your exemption. A sale is not a gift. So you have not utilized any of your $11 million that may potentially expire. And so again, we're running into clients who need income, who want benefits, but don't want assets. And so you can see that when we run into an obstacle like this, we're going to start to look at, okay, well, what else is out there, right? If we can't gift things away, we're going to have an estate tax. How do we pay it? Because we don't want to pay tax on that building. And so there maybe there's a strategy. Maybe there's using one parent's exemption, right? We'll gift a certain amount. And so if the estate tax exemption goes back down, the other parent will still have his or hers. Right, so we haven't had to give away $23 million, because how many clients are going to feel comfortable giving away $23 million and all the associated income?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's usually where we start when we talk estate tax planning, is kind of the basic principles of gifting and benefits.
Tim, I'm going to call on you real quick if you don't mind. Our Director of Premium Finance, Tim Whitmore. You know, you deal with high net worth clients all the time, right? I mean, that's a regular conversation that you're having. How does premium finance and how does kind of the grand plan of insurance play into the conversations that you're having when it comes to trusts and sort of the new landscape that we're in right now?
Sure. I was kind of smirking as Brian was talking because I had this conversation just yesterday with a client. Clients, let's call the estate in excess of $75 million. A lot of commercial real estate, a lot of income producing properties. And he said, look, I've got these properties and I'm a firm believer of the goose with the golden egg. So why would I ever sell these? But now that I'm getting up there in age, I don't want to do the maintenance on the property. I want to transfer one of them to my kids. So we talked about a bunch of planning and intentionally defective trusts, et cetera, and kind of tongue in cheek, I said, hey, there's an easy solution to this problem. Just buy a big old life insurance policy and throw it in an ILIT, right? That's the certainty of the planning. Yeah. But the other planning is going to be doing some of the things that Brian talked about, and we're going to land somewhere in between. But the certain part of the plan is going to be putting that life insurance in place. And then it becomes, how do we fund the life insurance policy? So when we use premium financing and estate planning, especially, Brian talked about using exemptions, right? How do we get the money inside the trust?
Did we lose you, Tim?
We lost you for a second.
Yeah, when you have an estate in excess of $70 million today, I think Brian would attest to this. How do we shelter that entire 75 million plus and still have the client have enough assets to live their current lifestyle and be comfortable with losing control of those assets? We're never going to get it down to zero. So there's always going to be an estate that we need to shelter and provide liquidity for, especially when you have, this particular client's pretty illiquid with their real estate. So, and then it becomes a question of how do we fund that? That's where premium financing comes into play. Because if you have a large premium, say it's $400,000 a year, how do I get that 400 grand inside the trust to pay for that premium? With premium financing, the trust is the borrower. Therefore, the client is just gifting interest payments. So you're gifting a smaller amount each year, and in a lot of planning, we can cover that by their crummy beneficiaries. So not only is it, and a lot of times, a more effective and better way to buy the life insurance, but it's also more cost effective on the planning side because we're not using any of that exemption amount.
Yeah, and kind of continuing on with what we said earlier about being able to reach out to Brian for any of these kind of strategies and his expert advice. Same goes for Tim as well. If he can facilitate anything on the premium finance side, and obviously for Nicole as well as it comes to insurance, if we can answer any of these questions as it relates to how you communicate with your clients of all kinds, please let us know.
Yeah, if you just provide a nice lunch, I'll pop over to any of your offices. That's all it takes.
I guess Arby's on Tuesday, guys.
Could you define nice lunch, Brian? So, but again, Brian, to your point of the uncertainty, that client I talked to yesterday said, I heard that everything's going to be retroactive to April. Right. So not only are these things going away, are they going to be grandfathered? There's a lot of noise out there right now. So the clarity that we can provide to our clients is saying, look, we know one thing for certain. If you buy a life insurance policy, you pay the premium, the death benefits are going to be tax free.
Sure. And if anyone's curious it's my answer to retroactivity. I think from an income tax and capital gain standpoint, that's a possibility, right? That these rules could go into effect as of January 1st. As far as gifting and transfer tax, I do not see that as the reality. I mean, there's sort of a constitutional provision, meaning we have to be able to rely on the law as it is, right? We can't make a gift and then they lower the exemption and we owe tax. So I think there is urgency as far as utilizing the rules while they're still there. The only thing I would worry about from retroactivity standpoint would be like increase in tax rates.
Yeah. Luke, do you mind if I call on you, buddy?
Sure.
It's great to see you, my friend. Love having you on these conversations that we have. What is, we love to kind of get like the boots on the ground kind of perspective. When you're having these conversations with your clients, is there a sense of fear? Is there a sense of foreboding about upcoming tax changes? Is it in people's, kind of conscious right now, or, where is it right now?
From my experience, almost a bit of a tug of war. I think I find that some clients they still have their CPA in their corner trying to get them tax savings right now, focused purely on deductions now as opposed to the foreboding future of increased tax rates and how do we offset that risk in the future. And there's almost sort of the sense of, I'm not sure if I should just look at purely what's saving me taxes now or should I focus on the future. So most clients I sit with, it seems like they're a bit confused as to what matters most and how to quantify that. That's what I've been seeing. And so having a conversation with the CPA, bringing the CPA into the mix or their tax planner into the mix, and having a conversation with them is invaluable, I think, getting their perspective, because I think many times they're kind of myopically focused on that aspect.
Well, Luke, I gotta say that was not a paid endorsement for him to say exactly what I wanted him to say there, but he did, which is the idea of reaching out to the CPA, reaching out to a tax planner. This whole conversation got kicked off by talking about the preferred partnership between Nicole and Brian and this group that they formed of really professionals of all kind who are like-minded in the idea of taking care of clients and finding the right solutions for them, right? And so I think Luke just voiced a very important part, which is you might sometimes have to navigate another person in their life, whether it's a family member, an advisor, it doesn't matter. Befriend that person, right? Find a way to, kind of knock down that barrier, or at least come to just sort of a solution around what you have to offer, they have to offer. I think if we approach things with the idea of keeping the clients, first of mind, they're the goal here, right? So as long as the conversation with the people around them stays focused on the client, I think you're in for a winning recipe there. So didn't know you were going to say that, Luke, but really glad you did. I knew I can always call on you, bud. We have another question here from the audience. Kevin, if you want to hop in right now and ask your question.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John. For Brian, Watermark, or anybody on the call, I was just curious with the inefficiencies around inherited IRAs now, so passing IRAs to the next generation. I know, especially while we're in our high earning years, if our parents give us an IRA, now all of a sudden we're paying the highest level of tax over the next 10-year period. Is there a life insurance play or a way to people who are charitably inclined to gift their IRA to charity, but then have their kids get life insurance? Just kind of a random thought, but was thinking about that as if anyone has thoughts or strategy on that.
So I have many thoughts on that, and probably too many for the remainder of this call. I think it's something to be aware of, right? Again, this is where we have these traditional strategies that are no longer effective, right? We used to maximize pre-tax, growth, have these large retirement plans. And then when a client passes away, the kids also would stretch the distributions out over their life expectancy, right? We are delaying the payment of income tax over many, many years. As of a couple of years ago with the Secure Act, the child must withdraw the funds from these plans within 10 years, right? And when you withdraw from the tax deferred plan, you pay income tax on it. And so when you look at the math behind that, right, if you have a $5 million IRA and you pay estate tax on it first, and then your children pay income tax on it when they pull it out, that is a terrible asset to pass along, right? We're paying estate tax on the asset that they're not going to receive the entire amount. And so there are some strategies there. None of them are perfect, but we are looking at Roth conversions, right? This is a way to turn that pre-tax into after-tax, and you can combine that with charitable planning to sort of wipe out or balance income tax over a number of years for a client. And so we're then passing on an after-tax Roth account, which is a great tool to have, or an asset to pass on to a child, for example. But that would take us down a complicated road of some other charitable discussions. And just know that when you're looking at the estate, that large retirement plan is not the asset, the preferred asset that we once had. And so it's definitely an obstacle. It's something we need to plan around.
Would you suggest using life insurance to pay the tax on the Roth conversion? So if you planned ahead from that perspective, because I know you don't want to use that asset to pay the taxes, you want to use outside dollars. So maybe they're not charitably inclined, and would that make sense?
Yeah. So what I would suggest to them is to use the insurance to replace the money given to charity that balances the Roth conversion. So in other words, we're converting the retirement account, causes income tax. Well, let's do something charitable, a lead trust, right? But if we do that, we're giving X dollars now to the charity. We want that eventually to come back to the kids. Well, we can use a policy to replace any lost assets to the charitable planning. That's one idea.
Yeah. Brian, just want to be cognizant of timing right now. If we can move on to the last couple of ideas, life insurance ILITs as dependable estate tax solutions, and also SLATs, what are their purposes and risks?
Yeah, well, we can go through the first couple really quickly because we've mentioned these. And so just on that technical issue, you may have policies that have a high cash value, but we want them out of the estate, right? If you gift that policy to a life insurance trust, that uses a portion of your gift exemption. Now, maybe if the death benefit is high, that's still a good use of the exemption, right? We're moving out the entire death benefit for the gift tax expense of the cash value. But currently with these crazy grantor trust rules I mentioned, you could actually sell that policy to the trust without any gain, and we can get the policy out of the estate and just return a note and pay some and pay some payments. So that may be going away when they eliminate these grantor trust rules. And then, as I mentioned before, 1035s. So just be aware of that. As far as just having this estate tax solution, right? This is sort of the foundation of kind of the whole conversation, which is the only thing that's not on the chopping block as far as all the strategies we've talked about today is life insurance trusts, right? For planning for estate taxes. We know that this will work. There's no, at least as far as I'm aware, concern about this strategy going forward. So again, kind of taking control of what we can control. That should be, if of course the client is insurable, a part of the discussion. So I want to get to SLATs because a lot of your clients may be coming to you saying like, here's this cool thing we can do. And it's the same thing that happened in 2012. And I know a lot of you were probably professionals at that time, and the estate tax exemption was going from 5 to 1 million. And so everyone said, well, hey, I'll just gift half the assets to my wife and she'll just gift half of the assets to me in these special trusts. We'll use our exemption. We still get to benefit from it. And, no worries, right? That's a spousal lifetime access trust. So now we've utilized the exemptions before they disappear, and we still have access to all our assets. As you can imagine, this is going to be heavily scrutinized, right? We're talking about having our cake and eating it too. And so this is something that we need to be aware of the risks of doing these transactions. First of all, we're in a community property state, or at least a lot of us are in California here. And we can't give community assets to a spousal trust. So we'd have to have some kind of agreement to separate assets out into separate buckets. Secondly, we can't have trusts that look effectively the same. I give to you, honey, you give to me, and we're all set. So now we're creating different instruments with different rules. And even then, if we both do this, we are at a high risk. And so now we have significant legal fees, right? Administrative costs, setting up new accounts and new irrevocable trusts, annual tax returns potentially for trusts. We're doing all of this, and we need to balance those costs against, okay, how about a policy, right? That doesn't just mess up your whole life, that doesn't take an unnecessary risk, because this planning is highly scrutinized. And again, these are all different tools. Maybe there is a tool. Maybe one spouse does this with some insurance, and so we don't have to take the risk of these sort of mirror, spousal trusts that are highly scrutinized. So just kind of putting this in your mind as you hear people doing this. Again, they don't want to give things away yet, but they want to use the estate exemption. Okay, I'll give it to a spouse. These will be common, especially if we get toward 2025 and the estate exemption is going down. But they are not sort of a silver bullet for estate tax planning.
So I think what we've heard is there are some great solutions out there. and there are some, harder ones to navigate. And most of all, I think we've learned that things are probably going to be changing a lot in the near future. And so arming you with this kind of knowledge, I think, was really our goal today. I want to share one other thing real quick, which is a PowerPoint that we're building. And this is really, we're building it for you. And it's kind of for you to use kind of in partner with Watermark Life Insurance if we can help. Let me bring this up real quick. So we can co-brand these with our agents in any way. Put your logo on top. These are for you, like we did with our Premium Finance webinar last month. We're building out an entire brand Bible around life insurance strategies, life insurance, estate planning ideas, really things, buy-sell agreements, things that maybe are not the easiest to convey to clients sometimes. We're working on this right now. If this is something that you're interested in, we would love to share it with you, and if you just want to look at it to bone up on your own knowledge, we'd love for you to do that as well. The last thing I want to kind of just end with real quick is, we talked about preferred partnerships at the beginning. Luke came in hot with his answer and really helped us kind of solidify that. But I just want to end on that point. Nicole, if you can just kind of talk about the value of finding a team of professionals who are like-minded and really have the client's goal at heart. I just feel like that is such a valuable tool for a life insurance professional to have that team around them, in addition to the team that you have at Watermark Life. Yeah,
no, for sure. I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, of course. So leaning into other people's strengths is a huge commodity. I couldn't stress it enough to each and every one of you, because it just makes us so much stronger as an advisor to our clients. And honestly, it brings so much more validity and help to your clients in the long run. Sorry, I'm stumbling upon my words, but the long and the short of it is that the clients need to be educated. They need to be knowledgeable about, obviously, what financial strategy or path they're taking, right? And we're here to guide them along the way, but ultimately they know what's best for them. And we can share with them all these different ideas and strategies and, procedures we can put in place to safeguard them and, obviously get them to pay less in taxes or whatnot. But they need to be on board and have the sign on as well. And so I think as long as you surround yourself with really important and strong, like-minded individuals that are well-educated and can convey the same things that you're trying to push on with these clients, it's so important to have them on board with you. That way the client has complete buy-in and there's no, resistance whatsoever. So.
And to Nicole's point, that client I discussed was referred to us by Northern Trust. So Northern Trust is one of our lenders that provides for our premium financing. And I've had a relationship with this individual for 15 years. Out of the blue, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to him. He said, "Look, I've got a client for you." So he referred over a client. Out of all the people he could choose, he chose our company, which is very humbling. But it's nice to get a $75 million client referred to you, every once in a while, especially, and those come from those preferred partnerships. So likewise, we refer clients out to CPA attorneys, and the referrals go back and forth. So it's always important to strengthen those relationships.
Yeah, and to Tim's point, I think what's incredible about that to me is, how long did you say, Tim? 16 years you've been working with this person?
Yes.
Yeah, and Tim has been providing value for over a decade to this person, friendship, advice, everything. They've been working together, and here, more than a decade and a half later, it quote unquote pays off, right? The idea that if you put yourself around good people, if you're offering value to them, someday, somehow, they'll find you valuable as well, and they'll refer you business. It might not be every day, it might be 15 years down the line, but if you're putting it out there, I do believe that it'll come back to you. Before we wrap up, we do have one last question. Scott, if you want to hop on, Scott Sage, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks, John, and Nicole, great job on putting this presentation together, and Brian, great job of speaking. I kind of had a question back to that grantor defective trust.
Sure.
Can you share with me again what we look for if we're trying to look into those plans or designs? What are we looking for as advisors on that?
So first you would be looking for policies that are currently owned by life insurance trusts, right?
Okay.
The reason is that the flexibility on being able to change, replace those with something else, access the value, could be impacted by this change. So that would be one. And then the other would be if a client has like a large cash value type policy, our ability to get that out of their estate, right? If they no longer want access to it, if they say, you know, I got this for one reason, but now I don't need it, I'm willing to put it in a life insurance trust so there's no estate tax. Our strategy for doing so would be limited if we don't have these grantor trusts anymore.
So let me make sure if I can clarify that. So I've got a client with a $10 million policy, no more premiums are needed. It's inside of an ILIT. Recommendation other than just to leave it there then?
If the policy is still appropriate for its purpose, then you would just leave it.
Okay.
You're all good. What we find though is that for whatever reason, the purpose we got it for is no longer appropriate. And so we would like to utilize the value to do something else. Okay,
so let me go one step further then. So this client used the unified credit exemption, gave his business assets to his children in the last 6 months because he's concerned about it. There's no more estate tax situation that's going to be levied against him. So would that be an opportunity to say, hey, gosh, got a couple $1 million of cash value in there. The death benefit's fine, but into that?
Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
And that they should look into possibly doing something else with that if they want to use current needs, or?
They would probably be fine, right? Unless there was a way to access additional death benefit with using the value of that policy for a different one, for example.
In exchange, okay.
Right, that would be going away.
Okay.
But it's a good example.
And then I have one other question. If we want to refer you into clients, I'm assuming that you'd be open to a complimentary meeting with them at your office, or how does that work?
Definitely, right. I'm happy to speak in advance just to see if it's the right fit, if it makes sense. I'm also happy to have a client meeting. We can do a Zoom, depending on your location, we can figure it out and get together. But yeah, generally the way I would work is to meet with the client, figure out what the need is. And by the end of that conversation, I can usually know whether I'm the right fit, what types of planning strategies we might need, even if it's just updating an estate plan. And, I can kind of quote a fee and let the client know, I work on a flat fee and here's what it would be. And they can say, great, or they can say, you're crazy, Brian. And they won't do that. We'll talk in advance and make sure that everything goes well. But that's generally how it would work, yeah.
And you do buy-sell agreements and deferred compensation agreements, those sort of things?
No, I used to actually in my older practice, and there's just too much estate planning now. So I would bring in a business attorney to do the business agreements. And have you, obviously, if you're the quarterback on that relationship, you can bring in that attorney and we'll all work together.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Scott, thank you. Thank you for your questions and your participation here. As we said in the chat function, if you want to open that up, you can take a look at Brian's information, his contact information, I should say, his phone number and email. Go ahead and reach out to us if you're trying to reach out to Brian, reach out to him directly to any questions, set up any meetings. I want to send off everyone with one kind of key takeaway, which is something Brian pointed to several times, and it's finding the client's purpose, right? I think that is such an important, really kind of a motto to live by, right? They might have different purposes for different retirement plans, for different, buckets, and kind of understanding where each, that might only be one bucket, right? 25-year-old kid might not have millions of dollars to plan with, might only be one bucket, but find out what that purpose is for, and then keep that in mind as you grow with that client, and always kind of know, I think, first and foremost, where they're going with that money and where they want that money to go for them. We're going to wrap things up right now. Nicole, thank you so much for setting this all up.
Yes.
Brian, cannot thank you enough for joining.
Oh, thank you for letting me do this. I love talking about this stuff. So for all of you, I appreciate the audience.
No, we can't appreciate you anymore. And also reach out to us if you're trying to reach Brian, or there's his contact information. Thank you again, guys. We'll be back next month with real estate and life insurance with professional skateboarder turned real estate investor, Mikey Taylor. That's going to be a pretty fun one.